I'm just waiting for YouTube to start so I can mute YouTube so we don't get a lovely, crazy echo, because I like to participate in the YouTube live chat while we are recording our webinars. So this is the awkward opening, but I'll start with the official opening here in just a few seconds once YouTube catches up. And there it is. Okay, see, I need to mute it. There we go. That was that awkward echo I was referring to. Okay, so hello once again to my happy marketers. It's so great to be with you again. Thank you so much for your time today. I'm Diana Richardson, and I am one of the social media and community managers here at Semrush. And I just wanted to say a huge thank you for you joining us today. Each time, we do one of these agency-focused webinars, they just get more and more engaging and interesting, and that is because of you guys. So thank you so much for being here. If you're joining with us live here, either on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter, let us know who you are, where you're from, and what your agency is in the chat. I would love to know who we're talking with. And while you're doing that, I'm going to do a quick intro about today's topic because I think it's a really interesting one. It's all about boosting your digital marketing services without sacrificing quality. So what in the heck do we mean by that is maybe there's, a certain marketing service you've been wanting to add to the menu of options for your clients. Maybe you've revamped your agency's way of doing things and you're able to bring on more clients. Say you've been asked a ton of times, can your agency do X, Y, and Z? And you've just never offered that before, but now you want to. All of those are amazing things to face, as a growing agency, but sometimes it seems a little scary to you and to your team and to existing clients because how the heck are you going to manage all of that? You don't want to spend, less time with each client, right? So it's a completely understandable situation to be in. And that, my friends, is what we're going to tackle today. Cool. So we have Dan Sullivan here today from Evansville, Indiana. And so keep on telling us who you are and where you're from. I'd love to know what agency you're with as well. And I am also, I'm talking really fast today. I'm like Lee. Lee just came in from a 5-mile run and he's a little verklempt. And so I'm like, talking really fast. I'm channeling the 5-mile energy, Lee. So we've got some really cool marketers here. Andre here is from Long Island. We've got another New Yorker here with us today. And while you guys are getting comfortable, I'm also going to ask you another question. I have a question, a poll for you. Hey, Shauna from St. Louis, Missouri. Nice to see you. I want to know from you guys, is there any digital marketing service that you wanted to offer at your agencies, but you just haven't yet? So let us know in the chat. And while you are thinking and pondering on that very question, I'm going to introduce you to our two amazing, outstanding, inspiring guests that we have today. I'm having a marketing, fangirl moment here because I've followed both of our guests for so long, and now I get to interact with them face to face as opposed to on Twitter or on LinkedIn. Lee, our two guests have had conversations with me, on social media. So we're social media friends, but it's really great to be able to actually ask them questions and see their fabulous faces. So first, let me introduce you to the CEO and co-founder of Top Rank Marketing, which is a B2B focused agency. He's an author and a podcast host and a super speaker. He's presented over 200 keynotes and workshops all over the world. Please welcome Lee Uden. Did I say that right,
Lee? That was a new one. In 10 years of speaking, that's the most unique pronunciation of my name.
You told me how to say it.
Thank you so much.
I still mangled it.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Lee Uden.
Uden. Okay, that's what I was going to say, and then I freaked myself out.
Oh, thank you. It's so good to be here with you.
It's wonderful. It's so wonderful to finally meet you in person again. Like I said, you and I have chatted through LinkedIn and things over the years, but it's really, really just great to see you. I also happen to mention that you just went for a 5-mile run. How often do you do that?
I'm sorry, I mentioned that.
I'm so curious how often you run.
I try to run every day.
Good for you. Whew. That's awesome.
Gotta optimize the body, right?
Way to bring it back. All right. So like I mentioned at the beginning, we have not one, but two amazing thought leaders today. Our second guest is the founder and managing partner of the enterprise SEO and content strategy agency, iPullRank. You may have heard of it. He consults with companies all over the world, and he's also a music artist. So please help me welcome Michael King to our webinar. Hey.
No, it's actually Kang.
Oh, dang it.
Nice.
Oh, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. Also excited to see Lee again.
Yeah, it's good to see you
so
too,
I was
Mike.
going to ask if you two had ever worked together.
Not technically. I think we've been on like the same conferences or maybe panels or whatever. And his organization worked with a large social media company that featured me once. So I got to work with his folks. But yeah, I don't think we've ever done anything where it was like my company partnering with his or anything like that.
And you've never co-hosted a webinar session with each other? Or
No, amazingly.
Cool. Well, like I said, I've been a huge fan of both of yours for a long, long time, being in the marketing industry myself for a while as well. And so it's just super cool to get to talk to you and pick your brains about this little topic. And you said yes to me very quickly, both of you. So I think you've got a lot to say about this subject. And so I think, we'll get right into it. Now, if the audience, if you're joining us live, on YouTube or on Facebook, and you have questions as we're having this conversation, go ahead and answer them. I can see all of those questions here on the screen. And when we get to the end, we can answer them live. I can put them on the screen and we can have a conversation with you guys and Lee and Mike as well. So don't hold back. Okay. On that note, Mike, I'm going to start with you. How do you know what kind of digital marketing services are in demand?
I think for us, because so much of our business is inbound, you kind of get a sense of demand just by like what's coming in through the form, or also like clients that we already have, they're saying like, oh, we need more of this or less of that. And so, I mean, it's a sample bias to some degree, but it is to some degree also reflective of what's going on in the marketplace. Beyond that, sometimes we'll just like try and launch something. So as an example, we get a lot of people that reach out to us that have pretty built out teams, whether that's on the SEO side or the content strategy side. So it'll be teams that actually already know what to do, but they're trying to think about what's the next level thing that we should do. Like what's the advanced thing that we should do? And so because we've had a lot of success supporting those types of teams, we threw up a landing page a couple months ago that's like SEO for advanced teams or whatever. And so we started to see a lot more leads come through that way as a result. So it's kind of like anything else. If you want to launch your product, people say like do the landing page first and see if it does anything. And I think that'd be a good way to test out whether or not a product or service is worth investing in.
I also really love what you said too about you using your team too. If there's something that they're interested in, if they can bring ideas to the plate as well. I think a lot of times entrepreneurs or the founder, the head of the agency or the business feels like the thought leadership has to kind of be on them, but your team is in the weeds and your team is with the clients and getting their feedback, or starting to investigate something that they're interested in developing in themselves could be the source of a really cool new product or service that you can offer. Lee, what do you say?
I agree with Mike. I mean, it's a balance of, reacting to what's coming in, but also creating demand. So strategically, you may decide as a organization that's like, look, as we narrow down, like in our case, about 5 years ago, we really started to narrow down our services. So, we kind of put a stake in the ground and said, we're going to focus on some areas. And we really had to work to create demand around some areas that weren't necessarily out there in that particular combination. You know what I mean? So alternatively, if you're an organization that creates a lot of content, you're publishing a lot of content, that's a lot of hooks in the water and a lot of analytics that you can use to determine what's of interest out there. I mean, it's one thing to go do, I suppose, keyword research or something like that, but it's another thing to see what's actually driving click-throughs and engagement onto your content. And so you might have content that explicitly talks about what you do, the problems you solve, and the tactics that you or services that you provide. But you might also start to experiment with other topics to kind of test things out and see if people react to that. And like Mike said, if they do, put up some landing pages to start to attract business.
What an interesting way to use your own data. That's so creative, right? Because you're letting the audience, without even having to ask them or survey them, you're using what they're already interested in to grow your business and create more. I think that's absolutely brilliant. And then you mentioned something about creating demand. So can you talk a little bit more about like how you actually accomplish that?
Well, in our case, we really focus on thought leadership. So thinking about who's your customer and what are their centers of influence. So what kind of information sources do they rely on to discover and interact with information as they pull themselves through a buying cycle or whatever. So industry, media, search, social. There are things and people that they subscribe to, people that influence them. There are entities that influence them. So kind of try to map out what those things may be and then start to publish messaging across those different channels around the thing that you're trying to create demand for. A long time ago, when Google started to include different types of media in the search results, I was playing around with a expression, digital asset optimization, like just made it up, right? And I got a couple of articles published in some industry publications, and we blogged about it in social or whatever to the extent that it was around. And I remember getting a call from a friend of mine who owned an agency. He's like, I see you're up to your tricks again. Like I have a client who's asking me about digital asset optimization, which wasn't really a thing, but it was an experiment, right? So you can create thought leadership by articulating what is a problem in the marketplace and how it might be uniquely solved, right? And if no one else is talking about that, you're creating gravity that attracts people to you, not only for maybe that particular solution, but the fact that you're staying on top of things. Like in Mike's company, if you want the most advanced SEO or content strategy services or whatever, he's created that reputation, like that IPO rank, that's where you go.
That's a soundbite.
And a testimonial.
I'll take my payment in dollars, please.
Sorry, we only do crypto.
That's cool. That's fine.
No, that's just absolutely fascinating to hear that perspective. And it kind of sort of talks a little bit about the question I wanted to ask next anyway. So from your perspective, what do you guys think about productization and how that can kind of help develop new services? Can it help develop new services? Can it help agencies specifically? What do you guys think about that? Mike, I'll go back to you.
Yeah, I think productization is really just an abstraction layer on what you're doing, right? Like you can decide to do what's a typical model, which is just like you're selling, hours, you're selling time or whatever. Or you can say, I have a series of products, they have this fixed price, and it's like, cool, you pick what you want off the shelf. Or in our case, what we do is when we're working with the client to, figure out how we want to work together, we're doing an upfront review of their situation based on their goals. And then we align it with a series of deliverables. So that way it's like, okay, we're saying you have this problem, you need this set of things off our menu in order to solve that problem. And the reason why that's valuable, at least from my perspective, like, I don't know if, my way is the only way, but it allows us to move away from the conversation of how many hours did you work on this month? And we're more focused on like, what were the results that we drove and how do we drive more of those? And, obviously like the hour conversation still needs to happen within the agency so we can determine how people are utilized, are we profitable, things like that. But as far as the client engagement, it's completely focused on what do we need to do to get you results? And then the value of those items may change based on the value that we're going to drive. So as an example, if we're talking about a giant e-commerce site that, we can literally see like, okay, there was an uptick of X based on us doing Y. There's more value in us doing, let's say, an SEO site audit as an example, than it is to do it for a small, website that just sells one product. So it also allows us to scale up and down on the pricing based on what the value is for the client. So I think that abstraction layer just allows us to be more profitable and also just keep the conversation where it needs to be, rather than on the minutia on how many hours someone spent on a project.
Yeah, that is one of my soapbox topics myself, is getting away from that hours conversation and more about what's actually being done to achieve the marketing goals. What are the tactics and the strategies regardless of the hours? Because whether it takes me 5 minutes or 5 hours, if the result is positive and headed in the right direction, then it doesn't, then the time isn't really
time doesn't matter, right? Exactly.
All right, what's your take on that, Lee?
Yeah, I do agree. I think when you're able to identify those things. Well, let's take a step back. So if you're looking at your organization, you're looking at your agency, you're thinking about this idea of productization or creating offers or something like that, as opposed to 100% bespoke, custom every time. There are some opportunities for you to scale. There are some opportunities for you to create consistent outputs and outcomes if you're able to identify and operationalize those things that work best within the scope of what it is that you do. So you can, if it could be beneficial to simplify to some degree the solutions that you're going to offer as packages or programs or whatever. And I have to say that right now, there are a lot of companies that are pulling back on their marketing budgets. Quite a few companies are just, there's hiring freezes, there's budget freezes until the new year starts and stuff like that. So there's a lot of companies that are being a little more conservative with their agency spend right now. And I think if you can communicate to them in the context of, look, we have an offer, right? This is an outcome-based offer, or, it's a productization output that you can deliver more value to them with, or more consistent value, better value for that's more efficient. That can be very appealing to them as they're looking to spend, the finite amount of money that they've got left for the rest of for Q4 or whatever, or for the rest of the year, versus a more ambiguous spend, right, on something that's going to, involve a lot more effort to define the scope or define things that you would normally do if you had a lot more runway. So something to think about.
I think that people have a lot more confidence and less trepidation around things when they know precisely what they're getting. And so, like we're saying, like the hourly model is like, yeah, give us a bunch of money, we might do stuff. It might cost more this month than it does next month. Like that just creates a lot of anxiety. Whereas when you're saying, okay, we're going to do a content audit, we're going to do a content plan, we're going to create 40 different pieces of content, there's a lot of clarity in that. And it's really been helpful in us, landing the deals that we've gotten, because especially when we're competing against that other model, and there's just so much ambiguity, like Lee is saying, they just don't feel comfortable moving forward on that.
Yeah, and what Lee was also talking about too, about the challenges that people are facing budgetarily and hiring wise. We actually just did a recent survey that found agencies are having a tough time hiring that talent. And that kind of wraps me into the question I wanted to get into next too, was if you're having trouble hiring, if you don't have the budget to hire and you're kind of just trying to tackle everything and grow, in your experience, what are some of the uncommon ways to quote unquote get faster at these digital marketing offerings so that you can take on more clients, so that you can grow, so that you can offer maybe a broader range of services? Is there a way to get faster?
You can go.
I was going to say, well, there's a kind of a simple answer to that. Clearly, technology plays a role. If there are technology solutions or platforms that you can master, and then you can certainly expand into other areas. A tool is only as effective as the expertise of the person using it, right? So if you have, if you're not able to hire someone, maybe you can hire a consultant that is a master user of the Semrush platform, for example, or some other platform that will allow you to expand what it is that you're able to offer That's a way, you know. Otherwise, if your organization is a culture of innovation, a culture of, look, I've got a bunch of people that are super smart, lateral thinkers. They've got side hustles, I'm like, they're solving difficult problems all the time. They're going to be sharing and cross-pollinating information with each other. That's just built into the culture that you're going to be getting faster, getting digitally savvy faster, right? And out of that collaboration can come the innovation that you're looking for without the additional hires and other investments.
Yeah. The only thing I'd really add to that, I mean, I'm going to say the same thing you did in different words, but I think automation is a big opportunity in the digital marketing space, because when you think about it, most of what we do in digital marketing, when it comes to like building strategies or coming up with tactics or whatever, a lot of it is downloading something from somewhere in a CSV, transforming it somehow, and then putting it somewhere else. And what I just described is something that, most tools can do, like a lot of automation tools can do. If you're using the Google Suite really heavily, you could build a lot of templates around your deliverables, and then set up, things in like Google App Script, or using Google Cloud workflows, pulling data from APIs, whether it's Semrush or whatever else, and put all that data in a BigQuery, and then have a series of operations where it's like, cool, click a button, put all this into a deck, and now what your people are spending their time on is developing the insights from all of that, rather than like copy and pasting from old decks, and like doing graphs in Excel and so on. Like a lot of that could be automated, and then it's really on them um, to make it as relevant to the specific situation as possible. So as an example, a common issue in SEO is that you may have a lot of external links pointing to pages that no longer exist, right? And so you can pull that programmatically, and then sort those programmatically as well, dump that into a slide in Google Slides, and then the actual consultant or what have you has to then go in and contextualize that for the actual situation, which is where the value largely lies in what we do. So it can really be taken from that being several hours to 30 minutes when you've done a lot of that automation.
And I think the theme in what you've both said is expanding your resources, is that you don't necessarily have to be the implementer or the doer of all of these things. You can take advantage of other people's expertise by using a consultant. You can take advantage of technology and bring that into your world, so that it is now off your plate and you can do something else. You can grow your agency, or learn to do PPC if you know what SEO is, and you can, free up your time a little bit by, and you might not have the capacity to hire at the time either. So that's again where partnering with the consultant could really come in handy, or again, spending the time to make those the automation in place, and then you'll have the free time once the automation can kick in and things like that. So very, very wise to use other resources other than yourselves. I know there's a lot of desire, to do it yourself especially if you're a solopreneur, or if you're a very small agency and you're really just wanting to get things going. You just have this drive to do it yourself, but really you've got, magical people to work with like Lee and Mike, that can help guide you and give you that kind of advice, that you don't have to do it all yourself, and you can free up some time to learn other things to keep that agency growing. So when you do add services, when you're adding new products, when you're adding and growing, when is the time to pump the brakes? You don't want to freak out your team. You don't want to freak out your existing clients. When is the time to pump the brakes?
Yeah, I think that's where the whole hour tracking can be valuable as an agency, because you do need to be, again, measuring the utilization. And you've also got to get an understanding of, what level of overutilization are you prepared to tolerate, and for how long. So there are some people that believe that, people in an agency should be 90% utilized at all times. There are some people that believe it should be something like 70%. And, once you get over that 100% where like people are working extra and so long, how long are you prepared to have someone be overutilized, so to speak, before you're like, okay, let's hire someone else, even if that person is going to be underutilized for a certain amount of time. And so that's also goes back to what Lee said about having consultants. This is another way to offset that utilization as well. And then that's someone that you can have kind of on demand as needed. But when you're talking about new services, that utilization number may actually hide what's going on as well, because you're going to have training hours and you may not be considering training hours as billable time. And so you may not be looking at the right number to determine this. So you've got to be real clear about what utilization means in your organization, and then how you're going to measure it effectively, and when someone's going to be overutilized. And then also, how long are you going to allow that before you bring in extra help?
Yeah, awesome. Of course, very insightful. I think one thing that we do is reconcile the difference between forecast, utilization, and actual.
Mm-hmm.
And then those department managers have those important conversations with their teams to make adjustments. And they do this on a weekly basis, because stuff always comes up, so to speak. There are overages, there's scope creep. There are situations where we really do need to, do that extra thing to retain that client. Or we may find that we're over-servicing the client, or individuals are, their hours are too high, and we've got to manage to that. And there's other stuff as far as burnout goes. We're strong advocates of that work-life balance, and so we have programs like unlimited PTO. And things like that. So we're like, that doesn't just mean you get to take unlimited vacation. It means we try to manage that everyone's taking a minimum amount of vacation every month, and their managers, make sure that happens. And so there's utilization, and there's client hours and billable hours and all that stuff. But there's also the management of the sorts of things that refresh people, and try to incorporate the kinds of things in your organization that in a virtual environment these days, it's harder to create those connections and those sort of water cooler conversations and all those other things that add a little spice and interest to people on a daily basis, and try to make those things, to the extent that we can, happen. We just had our first Top Rank Summit a couple of weeks ago, where we flew in people from 9 different states into Minnesota and had boat meeting. We call them pontoon meetings. And had, Sally Hogshead, I don't know if you know who she is, a professional speaker, come in and talk to us about personality styles and other breakout meetings and things like that. And it was just really refreshing to have that. So I think it's a mixture, right, of the culture, and then also obviously the people management, the human resource management aspect of it too.
Just like in marketing, we're in a world of people, right? And we have to take care of them. And obviously growth is top of mind for any business owner, but you have to protect your people and take care of your people if that's ever going to be successful, because they're the heart. Also, Lee, can I have an invitation to next year's pontoon party meeting? That sounds really fun. And then I can try some of that food you were talking about earlier. All right.
Come on over.
Cool. I love it. I've never been to Minnesota.
Oh, it's awesome there.
Yeah, I bet. It sounds beautiful. Okay, so scenario. You've had the great, brilliant idea. You've mapped it out. You've launched a new service that's going to be awesome for your agency. How do you bring in new clients specifically interested in that new service?
Marketing.
But specific marketing, right?
I mean, it goes back to what Lee was saying before, like the thought leadership is a big part of it. Also, if you want to do any advertising, like brand building things, I mean, just think about your funnel, right? Like, how do you get more people into that funnel? And if you're doing something like, and I'm not going to just sit here and steal your example, but I am actually, digital asset optimization, what he did is he wrote a series of articles on industry publications. I suspect they also had some things on their own website that could be lead magnets related to it as well. And then probably, webinars, the whole nine, right? So It's really like, how do you get people into that funnel? And again, it's a function of the content, also running some ads, doing partnerships with organizations and more content. So yeah, it's largely a content strategy on how you make that happen. I don't think there's any real secrets there. It's just really, how do you get the word out about the awesome things you're doing?
Yeah, I think what I always tell my team is the most powerful investment in marketing we can make is in the work, because, and then it's activating the positive things that clients say. We have an incentive program, an internal incentive program called Flames. People can give flames to each other, and the thing you get and the flames are points you can reward them for, or redeem them, for fabulous prizes. Anyway, so the thing you can get the most flames for is when a client gives unsolicited kudos, right? And so they're always watching and instigating that, and then we can activate that as testimonials and in the form of case studies, and really think about how you can drive stories in the marketplace and drive reputation for yourself. And in our case, we take our own medicine. A very large part of what our company does, our B2B focused, is work with B2B influencers, B2B technology influencers. So we're super, super niche, right? And so we work with people who are influential that might refer business to us as an agency, and we maintain relationships with them. We do things for them. We give them not money, but we give them exposure and other things you might do in a value exchange, in a relationship, in a business relationship. And we also create a steady drumbeat of content on social and through our blog. Our blog has been publishing posts since late 2003, right? That's a crazy number of years. And on social, Elaine Ellis, who manages our agency social, and he used to be at PubCon for like 10 years. A tweet or a couple of tweets he put out attracted what is now our largest client, right? And they just happen to be listening. And, this is a global telecommunications company. And so you've got to be present. And you've got to be, in some cases, I think, be the best answer for whatever it is that you do. And that means sometimes being prolific on that thought leadership stuff that Mike was talking about. But facilitate those conversations, that word of mouth. I mean, that's super powerful.
So I've got a great example of this. I was at an agency before, and I'd written a blog post about how you maintain your social share numbers when you change your URLs. And it was something that, like, it was a question everyone had. No one really knew how to do it. I knew how to do it because I read the documentation in the various social sharing things. And so I wrote this blog post. I think it was for like Search Engine Watch, and I didn't think much of it. And then this guy from American Express reaches out to me, and we ultimately ended up getting like a 6-figure deal out of it or whatever. And what he told me is that he had read my blog post, and they were working with iProspect. And he reached out to the team at iProspect, and he was like, "Hey, do you guys know anything about, saving social shares when we change URLs?" They sent him my blog post. And he was like, "All right, well, if you guys can't help me, I'm just going to reach out to this guy." And that's how we got a really large deal with American Express.
That's awesome. That's content marketing, is it? You put out something that's super useful, and someone acted on it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and those tie into, you both just tied in the conversation perfectly. Like, being present, and not every blog post you write is going to be quoted back to you. Like Mike said, not every blog post you write is going to bring in American Express, but that's okay, because at some point you never know what's going to happen and how it's going to affect the audience, because at some point someone will find your tweet and seek out Lee and his agency and his consultancies, so you just always have to be present and active and consistent. And it's okay if not all of them are as prolific as you want it to be. I loved that word you said, Lee, prolific. And that's okay. But the point is to be there, to keep the message going, to keep the thought leadership going, because it builds on itself and someone will listen. So, okay, That was awesome. Audience, okay, we're going to go ahead and I want to get some questions. We already have a couple of questions coming in, which is awesome, but I want you to think on it a little bit more because we're going to ask Lee and Mike live what you're actually thinking. And while you're thinking of those questions, I am going to show you just real quickly how in Semrush you can find those new clients looking specifically for your new services. So I'm just going to share my screen really quick. Oh, not slides. I need to just share my screen. And so we have this tool called Bid Finder that we launched back in December. And it's a curated list of open marketing projects from like industrial. So it's more in government and educational type bids, but you can search them by topic. So if you've just started to offer motion design, which is high in demand right now with as much as, you know, video and things like TikTok are taking over the world, it's a very common new service for folks to be offering. You can search specifically for that. And so now, again, now you can reach out to these people who are looking for your new service and create that connection and maybe help them out with a new project and bring in a new client for yourself. So, oh, sorry, I almost left the whole meeting. There. Button clicking 101. Don't leave your meeting. All right, cool. So I just wanted to share that with you guys since we are on the topic of how to bring in clients specific to your new services. And now we're going to get to the questions from our audience. So Misty would like to know, is there a way and how do you find multiple clients, but then keep them all satisfied?
So how do you start an agency, basically?
But then keep the clients happy.
Yeah, I think we've talked a bit about like how you find clients, and you know, Bid Finder seems like a good way to do that as well. But as far as keeping them happy, I think it really comes down to one, process, and two, having great people that can you know, think beyond your process. And one of the things that was a struggle for me is that I'm just not inherently a process oriented person. I'm the type of person where if you ask me to do the same thing 2 times, both times I would look for new ways to make it better. And that becomes difficult when you start to hire people, because if you don't have a clear set of instructions, especially for a more junior person, it's very difficult for them to wrap their head around what to do. And what they'll end up doing is look at your previous version of the thing and just look to replicate it. And when you do that, you may not understand the nuances of why those things were done, and you end up including things that aren't relevant to the actual account. And so I think the two things go hand in hand. You know, the idea of having someone who's smart and creative and can continue to learn, which is really important in this space. And also having the ability to document and train on the way that you want things to be done. Both of those things are incredibly important to the success of what you want to do.
I would agree that you know, finding the clients obviously is the marketing advice that we both shared a little while ago. But keeping them satisfied, it's, you know, it's about setting expectations. Here's what you're going to get, and you know, making sure you're hitting above that as much as possible, meeting or exceeding expectations, and you know, obviously finding the right kind of people and having, you know, what's that expression? People, process, and technology, right? It's a universal truth when it comes to an organization and how it functions. So, have the right people, as Mike said. Obviously, have technology if you can afford it, and process for sure. I mean, I can tell you, as our agency is 21 years old, and we wouldn't be able to have sustained for as long as we have, and there are all the changes and different things that happen in the world without having well-developed processes, and even processes on how to develop new processes. It's not too meta, but it is something that ensures quality.
So important.
It helps with onboarding and consistency of quality, but also oftentimes consistency of impact. And that's how you keep people happy.
I love all of those points. It's a holistic approach, right? And it takes everything. It isn't just one thing you have. And, you said it earlier too, in that your work speaks for yourself. The work speaks for it. So that's part of keeping your customers happy too, is, living up to those expectations and doing good work. So it all comes together. So Misty had a follow-up question around this. I wasn't quite sure what she was asking, so we'll come back to it if she can clarify. But Shauna has a really interesting question. So how does a small 15-person agency prioritize their marketing while maintaining output for their clients? Any tips there? It's a really good question.
I think that one's difficult because this time is finite, of course, and it's what's the saying, like the cobbler's kids have no shoes or whatever. And really, you need to have people that take ownership of it, because I've tried it where it's like, oh, everyone can contributes to marketing, and you're not going to have consistent marketing efforts if you do it that way, because that's not people's core job. Like, their core job is to be an account manager or an SEO or a content strategist or whatever it is. So they're not going to be able to commit to that for the amount of time that's required for your marketing to be consistent. So I would say, make that someone's role, and make it so it's someone who at minimum is a great writer. Like, ideally they would be able to be, like a paid media person as well. But the content itself is the biggest thing that you need for your marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. When I wrote a book 10 years ago called Optimize, and I was coming close to the due date for the manuscript, and I hired a project manager, because I'm not a super process. Implementing processes is not my forte. That's why we have people smart do that stuff. And to getting it done, I hired someone to be a project manager. And when the book was published, I had such a good experience. I was like, would you like to stay on to be an agency marketer? And this is a person that was very good on the writing side. So totally agree with you, Mike. And because we had a platform like a blog that was fairly well read, was instrumental in having someone who owned that function, right? And could also marshal other resources within the organization. It's like, hey, can I get a quote here? What are some common questions you're hearing, account manager, about problems that clients bring up? And let's answer those questions in our blog posts. And just facilitate a little bit of time from those other 15 people or 14 people, and that turned into a very productive activity. So maybe you test somebody out in some way. Maybe you bring them on straight up because they've done this before. But either way, I totally agree. You've got to have someone that owns it.
Yeah, and maybe that's a good way to foster your employees' skills, because if someone has been working on the client side, but maybe they're interested in strengthening their in-house type skills, then maybe they're a good candidate for something like that, to test that out. And while maybe reduce how many clients they're working with, so they can focus on your own agency's marketing too. And we actually, Semrush, we just had a webinar about marketing your own agency when you're busy marketing other people. So if you go back and look in Semrush Live's YouTube channel, you will see that episode there. All right, so we have a question from Mr. B. Let me see what this says. There have been a couple algorithm updates, of course, since May, one just rolling out today, as a matter of fact. Why do you think that the biggest ranking factors changes since then, based off of things you have seen with your eyes? Oh, okay. So what do you think are the biggest ranking factors that have changed as the algorithms are evolving, is what I think he's asking.
I personally don't like algorithm update conversations, and the reason why the reason why, and I feel like Semrush is actually uniquely positioned to fix this, but everything is super anecdotal. You'll have people talking about, we looked at this tool and it says that, the weather was crazy this day. And then they'll start looking and be like, oh, it must be this thing on this type of sites. But it's not enough. It's not enough data to make like real definitive discussion about it. But the thing is, the SEO industry acts like it is, and then they start being like, yeah, you need content that's at least 750 words. And it's like, no, that's not it at all. And so what I'm saying about SEMrush being uniquely positioned to, do something here, the data set that y'all have, you're tracking hundreds of millions of keywords every day. If you also looked at the changes on those pages to see, okay, and then like regressions and whatever, to determine which of these changes are the ones that have happened at scale as far as like what ranks better, then we can answer those questions. So, for me, as far as like what I've seen that's different, it really just looks like Google's looking for the higher quality content. And I hate to say that because it sounds like a cop out, but the features that you're seeing them discount are in alignment with things that people don't actually want, and they're talking about this whole helpful content thing that they're going to roll out, which it sounds like they're looking for sites that are more focused rather than like, we write about every topic, and we're just trying to get traffic for anything that has search value. So, I mean, it really just comes down to, because ultimately at the end of the day, like, what are we going to do different? And, a lot of the algorithm updates since Panda and Penguin haven't really yielded a situation where you need to do something different. However, this helpful content update, it looks like it's going to be the sort of thing where they want you to be more focused on the things that you're actually an expert on. And that's the same with the whole EAT thing as well. So I think what we're seeing is like, just go more in that direction, like have topical clusters rather than like you wrote this one thing on this topic because it has a lot of search value.
Exactly. There's no clear line of sight, cause and effect between, right? So it's not like you can reverse engineer directly. I mean, obviously there's people who say they can and whatever, fine. But I like the recommendation you made, Mike, about using SEMrush to, from a relative perspective, see the changes that are happening within your own universe and then making adjustments accordingly, right? The whole idea, it's like, just think about, what is it that people want to make it more complicated than it is, but what is it that consumers are looking for, right? They're looking for useful information. So do what you can to create the best experience you can. And obviously there is a technical aspect to that. There's a linking aspect to it. There's a content aspect to that. And maybe there are nuances in highly competitive industries, and, especially on the consumer side. I don't play there. So, I'm stuck in the B2B space, which is a little bit different. And luckily for me, in the B2B space, there's so much more content needed in order to sell just one thing, because there's a 6-month, 9-month sales cycle. They're already in a good situation in terms of mentally accepting the fact that they've got to commit to creating more content.
Yeah. And the one thing I want to double click on, because you said like focus on your own universe. There's a great blog post by a gentleman named AJ Cohn where he talks about this idea of segmenting your keywords based on what he calls a query class. So as an example, like, sneakers in Boston, sneakers in New York, like that could be one query class. And when you set up groupings like that in your rank tracking solution, it gives you a clearer understanding of where there was a change, because typically you'll see fluctuation for the same type of query when Google makes a change. Then what you would do is look at that page or that page type and then see, what were the pages that did better? Like, who are the competitors that did better? And then compare what you don't have on your page. And then you make those adjustments. So generally speaking, I would say, if you want something actionable to do related to algorithm updates, create those keyword buckets so you have a better understanding of where the impact was.
You both touched on 2 SEMrush features that I'm going to talk about really quickly. So we have the SEMrush sensor, which is industry specific. And when these algorithm shifts happen, you can see if it's, because they don't happen universally, right? So the helpful content update that's rolling out starting today is going to likely affect certain industries. And actually, I think Google identified I think for the 4 first industries that it's going to affect. But if you're in one of those industries, or if you dropped rankings and you want to know it has this update, then you can check the sensor to see if your industry is being hit by these changes. And then what you were just saying, Mike, about keyword buckets, you can, in our position tracking tool, you can actually tag your keywords for those buckets. So yeah, if you've got a group of sneaker keywords and they want to be sneaker and not tennis shoes, then you can, or not retail, maybe they're not even retail oriented keywords, you can tag them so you can see if it's, the algorithms are affecting retail keywords versus FAQ type keywords versus, review type keywords. And for that type of deeper analysis. So, yeah, really good tips. And I don't want to get too far away from our overall discussion, which is about adding new services. So do you think, this is the last question that we'll end with, like, do you think that things like algorithm changes, both in search, social media has it too, do you think that is a reason to not offer something like SEO or not offer organic social?
That's job security right there.
Okay.
It's the reason to offer those services.
Yeah.
When there's uncertainty, you look for a trusted source to guide you through that ambiguity, that uncertainty, and an agency specialist absolutely can be that solution.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the algorithm updates tend to be triggers for the need for work. So as an example, let's say you came to us and we work with you, we're doing great work, we've seen everything go up and to the right, and then you're like, well, we're done, everything is working. But then there's an algorithm update and suddenly they're like, oh wait, we still need you. In fact, we need you to do this again because the whole landscape has now changed. So that's what I mean. It's 100% job security. There's a lot of or really it's a handful of clients that we've worked with, and it's been like a one-off project sort of thing. And then, they got the great results. And then a year later, they're like, hey, what happened? We need your help again. And then those turn into longer term engagements when it's like clear to them that, we can't do this alone. We need someone who's looking at this across a variety of industries and knows how to replicate success, irrespective of what's happening in my industry, because they understand organic search so well, or organic social so well.
Wow. You guys, this has been such an absolute blast conversation. Thank you both so much for all of these insights. Letitia in our live chat keeps saying, this is a gem. This conversation is such a gem. And I completely 100% agree. So, let's wrap up. And I just want to say, Lee, where can our audience find out more about you, your books, your next speaking event?
Sure. Toprankmarketing.com. That's our agency site, which also links off to the blog where we're publishing 3 times a week. And obviously on the socials, Twitter and LinkedIn, especially, Leodden, Leeodden. It's always a great place to connect.
And same with you, Mike. Where can we find out more about you and all the things that you are up to?
There you go. Yeah. At iPullRank on all the things, and iPullRank.com. We've got a blog as well and a lot of content. And if you like music, you can check me out at bestrapperever.com.
That is one heck of a URL. I love it. And this was just such an awesome conversation. I feel like we could keep going for hours and hours, but I loved every minute of it. So thank you both for being here with me today. Thank you for saying yes and joining the conversation. Thank you to our very engaged and active audience today on YouTube and on Facebook. You all are fabulous. And we are going to have another webinar. It'll be our last webinar of the year in October. And then we're going to start a whole new round in 2023, which I will absolutely be inviting Lee and Mike back to. So keep your eyes open there, but come back and see us in October. And from everyone here at Semrush, we wish you all a wonderful day. Thank you guys.
Bye.
Bye.